Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Bernhardt, Director of the Stanford Language Center. I want to give you a brief overview of Stanford language programs. Language programs at Stanford prepare you to have a foreign language skill that enhances your academic programs. We want you to be able to live, work, study, and research in another country. You're a Stanford student, so you need to be able to initiate interactions with others from other cultures and to engage with those other individuals on areas of mutual concern. Our language programs are proficiency oriented. That means that we emphasize doing rather than knowing. We want to make sure that you learn to speak, listen, read, and write in ways that are immediately useful in a real-world setting. In first-year programs, we emphasize speaking and writing so that you learn to interact with native speakers in social settings. And we focus on reading and listening to things like short news and weather reports, short films and documentaries, book reviews, etc. These are forms that native speakers would use themselves on a daily basis. Second-year programs build on what you learn in first year by moving you from a sentence-based kind of interpersonal level of language into a presentational paragraph mode of language. We ask you to conduct research on topics of interest to you, not on topics that we choose for you, the topics that you choose, and we ask you to present those topics to your teachers and to your peers. We emphasize an academic vocabulary and we use materials such as editorials, news broadcasts, analytic essays, and the like. We want you to use those materials as good models for your own writing and speaking so that you learn to cultivate a pretty sophisticated level of language. And you know what? You absolutely have to go to class. Classes are taught in the target language, and time on task is absolutely critical for your learning. If you're going to become proficient, you're going to have to speak with your teacher and with your peers. You're going to have to read things in common with them and discuss those things, and then you're going to have to articulate what you think about those readings in your own writing. We use authentic materials, meaning that they are not constructed for learners. That is, when you listen to the audio or video that your teacher presents to you, you're listening to language that others would encounter in their daily lives as native speakers. Language learning is really important. It's a tool for your toolbox, and it's a key to the rest of the world. For answers to frequently asked questions, please watch our PowerPoint, then join Tracy Reason and myself during new student orientation.
The purpose of this PowerPoint is to give you more information about language learning at Stanford. It's organized by the most frequently asked questions that are posed, specifically by incoming freshmen. So those questions are: why study language? Which languages are offered? Which language should I study? Can I begin a new language any quarter? So the first one, why study language? Let's listen to a couple of our own students talking about their own opportunities.
It's given me a lot of different perspective, and I think it allows me to approach situations with a more open mind, I think, just because I've had a lot of experience with the culture and with the language, and so I feel like I can understand what little I do understand. I feel like I understand well, and that allows me to, it gives me a sense of humility when approaching other situations, and I think that can be beneficial. Because you approach situations with an open mind, and if you approach situations with an open mind, you're more likely to get opportunities, is at least what I've seen.
I am going to be serving in the Peace Corps for the next 2 years, and definitely my language skills, particularly in Russian, helped me get that. So I just think there's just a lot of opportunities that are open to you if you learn languages.
Which languages are offered? Wow, this is a complicated question. Currently, we offer more than 40 different languages. There are some of the languages on the list that you may have never heard of. You won't know which part of the world they're from. Those are interesting things to explore. You'll also see many languages that you're familiar with, but most assuredly, you'll see the wealth of languages that we offer. You probably come from secondary school settings that offer 2 or 3 different languages. Here at Stanford, you have a wealth of opportunities of different languages. The question then always becomes, well, which language should I study? You gave me a list of 40. Which should I choose? First question in response. Which language or languages have you already studied? It's really important that you get a firm grasp on any language that you've studied so that you can use that language into the upper registers. What's that mean? It means you could use the language in a professional setting, so that you could use it in an internship, for example. You need to be able to speak at what we call a paragraph level. That means you have some organization in your language and that you can connect sentences together. But then you'll confront the question, which academic area are you considering? So are you interested in the environment? You might want to think about taking Portuguese so that you can go to Brazil. Are you interested in horseback riding? You might want to take Dutch. Are you interested in how cell phone service operates in rural areas? You might want to think about taking Swahili. Then, of course, there's always the question, do you want to study abroad? And in that case, it's very important that you have some knowledge of the language where you're going to study abroad, and you need to acquire that language before you go, not during. Here are some of our own students talking about which language or languages they studied, how they decided, and how they fit that language study in.
Even if you place out of your language requirement, shop one of the language classes maybe for the first week and see if you like it. I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised.
The most valuable thing is to study something not because you have to, but because you want to. So what I would encourage students who are questioning whether or not to continue with language is that there is so much additional opportunity that can open to you by continuing a language at Stanford and by really delving into it at the advanced level that comes with university education, that you can never be worse off for continuing to study language. You can only be better off.
I've been able to fit it in. I think I've always wanted to have like a well-balanced quarter. So there's some quarters where I'm taking all classes for my major, but I found that usually in a lot of the quarters I can throw in a class that I just really want to take. And often for me that's a French class. So that's how I've been able to fit it in. Also I knew I wanted to study abroad. So I worked with, once I declared my major, I worked with my advisor to make sure I could fit in studying abroad because I knew that was something that I wanted to do and that I made a priority. So I think if you are focused on fitting the language classes in and studying abroad, there's ways to do it, but you kind of be more proactive about your schedule. It's actually been pretty easy, I think, one, because we're on the quarter system, so we change classes 3 times a year. It's made it easier to fit the language classes in and then have the whole quarter abroad.
So I'm a computer science major, so a lot of people ask that question. They're like, how are you able to study abroad? How are you able to fit language classes? But I think, well, first of all, even if you're like an engineering major or computer science or anything, you can't take all computer science classes every quarter. Like, it's just not possible. You're not gonna have enough time. And so when you choose like those other classes that you're gonna take, for me, language was a priority. So I just chose to take those classes. And then I also kind of view like language learning as like a hobby. So I don't know, it didn't seem like a huge issue to add those classes to my.
Speaking of fitting things in, the question becomes, when should I begin this? How do I begin this? And again, an ambiguous answer. It sort of depends. Many of the languages that you've seen on the list begin sequences each quarter. We have an unusual year, as you know, this year, so some language course schedules are still to be determined for future quarters. And then there's the set of languages that we generally begin only in the autumn, and those are grouped according to African and Middle Eastern languages, or what we call the special languages. Those are languages such as Czech, Filipino, the Native American languages, and so forth. We also give you a special opportunity that we all highly recommend, which is to take an intensive course, that is, completing 3 quarters of language study in 2 quarters. These are challenging courses, but students often remark that they were incredibly helpful to really delve deeply and quickly into their language of choice. Here's some advice from your fellow students.
I think coming in as a freshman, I was really nervous about, was I supposed to be at Stanford? Was I smart enough to be in the classes that I was in? And that sort of feeling, and that also translated to my language classes. I was definitely really shy in the beginning. I think there were like 7 or 8 people in my first language class, and I never wanted to raise my hand or talk. And really that was hurting me because it was more helpful if I spoke in class and practiced speaking French, but I was definitely nervous. If we were reading something aloud, I wanted the passage to end before it got to me and that sort of thing. So advice to myself coming in is to not be afraid of it. And, no one was ever judging my pronunciation. Often if I had a question, other people had the same one. So to not be afraid to raise my hand and participate in class and ask questions, even if you feel like as a freshman you're kind of the underdog. There are probably other people who are wondering the same thing.
Go into it with an open mind. Pick something new if you're feeling something new. Continue with something that you've already been working on. Go deeply, and just with like an open mind and open heart, and everything will be great.